Welcome to the Paranormal Stakeout radio TV show with Larry Lawson. As a former career law enforcement officer and law enforcement educator, Larry focuses on the use of tried and true law enforcement investigative techniques in conducting paranormal investigations. Despite his experience and training, Larry also keeps an open mind to discussions on topics that deal with evidence that are not quite as physical in nature. Paranormal Stakeout guests are professionals in the field of the paranormal and parapsychology, conducting the investigations and research needed to further the cause of paranormal study. Larry advocates an agenda of standardization of structure and training in the field of paranormal investigation and research for the purpose of one day being able to produce the evidence needed to convince a jury of the existence of the paranormal. Whether it is ghosts, UFOs, unsolved mysteries, hauntings or cryptids, no topic is beyond the investigative reach of Larry Lawson and the Paranormal Stakeout radio TV show team. Now, here is the host of the Paranormal Stakeout radio TV show, Larry Lawson.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to Paranormal Stakeout, coming to you from the headquarters of the Florida Bureau of Paranormal Investigation in beautiful Vero Beach, Florida. Great to be back with you. I've got a terrific guest tonight. I know we're going to have an outstanding time. Well, I do want to take a quick second, though, to keep the thoughts of our friends, families, neighbors in both Maui and the north part of Florida after the disasters they've had up there. You know, sometimes in this field, we get caught up in what we're doing in any field, I guess, really, and we forget about those that really are less fortunate than us. So please keep all the folks in those disaster areas in your prayers. East Palestine, Ohio, being a Buckeye, you know, that hit home also. So keep those folks in your prayers. I also want to make note, if you'd like to get a hold of me, if you've got a question, thought, or comment about the show, something you'd like to maybe get answered, you can get a hold of me at paranormal Ghost Guide paranormalstakeout.org. You can send in a message and we'll get to it right at the beginning of the show. So please take that opportunity and do that. If you'd like to know a little bit about more about my team, you can go to paranormalfbi.com or indianriverhauntings.com and see all the things that we're up to. You can also catch us on Facebook and on YouTube. We got some stuff on YouTube also, and you can find us at Indian River Hauntings 2341. So check us out, and of course, always check out the great programming here on the X Zone Broadcast Radio and TV Broadcast Network. Tonight's guest, wow, I've had some cops on the show, you know that, because being a retired flatfoot myself, I like to talk to cops and other first responders about their interests and their experiences. But tonight's a little bit different. I have a gentleman who's not only known as the psychic explorer, but he's known as the psychic lawyer, Mark Anthony, JD. Mark is a fourth generation psychic medium who communicates with spirits. He's an Oxford educated attorney, and he's tried over 100 jury trials. And folks, I can tell you that's a lot of jury trials, all things considered. He's licensed to practice law here in Florida as well as DC at the Supreme Court level. He's known as the psychic explorer due to his extensive background in science and quantum physics, survival of consciousness, near-death experiences, history, archaeology, philosophy, theology. He examines mystical locations all through the U.S. and in different parts of the world. Television, he's authored books. I just want to get to him and start talking. So I'd like to welcome Mark Anthony, the psychic explorer, to the show. Mark, so happy to have you here.
Thank you, Larry. It's great. And before we were on the show, you used to be a cop and I used to be a prosecutor, and I love it because we speak the same language.
We do. And what a lot of folks don't know is I spent a number of years as an investigator for the state attorney's office in the 19th Circuit here in Florida. So spent a little bit more time on your side sometimes than the cop side even. But yeah, so we speak the same language. But a lot of my folks getting to know you maybe for the first time in my audience. Tell us a little bit about Mark Anthony, Psychic Explorer.
Well, I was born a psychic medium because this runs in my family for generations on both sides. And the
Mhm.
thing is, I've tracked it back to the 1890s on both sides of the family. So that's going about 4 generations. And it probably goes back even farther than that. It's just that, it's hard to find the documentation. And my
Mhm.
dad was a US Navy SEAL and a NASA engineer. So he was a real no nonsense kind of guy, but he had mediumistic ability. And my mother was the full package. I mean, mom was a very gifted psychic medium, and she was a commercial illustrator and an artist. And so there I am. I'm 3.5 years old, and I start playing with and interacting with my invisible friends. Except that mom and dad could see and understand who I was talking to. And I'll never forget mom's reaction was like, "Oh, he's got it." And dad was just like, "Ah, geez, he's got it." So, so the reactions were a bit different. And what it was is my dad he knew how difficult this could be.
Mhm.
It's hard enough being a kid, but when you're a strange kid. But my parents were very cool about things. And when I was starting, I went to Catholic school. I was raised in the Catholic faith. And I remember before I went to my first day of school, dad said, "You can talk to your mother and I about these things all you want, but not anybody else." And when I got into the Catholic school program, I could see why they said that. So, and then it's always been with me throughout my whole life. And as I got older, the older I got, the more intense my abilities became. And then it just got to a point, Larry, where I reached a crossroads in my life. And the stories about why I left the practice of law and everything, it's a long story, but it would take up the whole show to get into everything. But I finally embraced my abilities, and then whether I wanted to or not, they became public. So I've left the practice of law. I still appear on TV and radio as a legal analyst, and
Mhm.
I work behind the scenes on cold cases. And I just did an investigation of a cold case for a brand new Discovery Channel show. My manager Rocky and I, we were up there in Indiana, checking and investigating the Lee Allen Bryant Sanatorium, and that place was a house of horrors. Definitely,
Mhm.
what had happened there. So here I am.
Wow. Tell me, how did you find your abilities? Were they in conflict with your work as an attorney? Or did it enhance? I mean, the question's gotta come out, well, did you know what the verdict was gonna be prior to? I'm sure you heard that joke on one or two
Oh,
occasions.
all the time. And the thing is, what people need to understand about psychic and mediumistic ability is that it doesn't make you omnipresent. In other words, I am not
Mm,
all seeing and all knowing. God is. I'm not. What it does is it gives me glimpses and insights. And it certainly came in handy. I never found it in conflict with my work as a lawyer. In fact, I found that it worked in tandem because as a lawyer, you have to have evidence to prove your
there
case.
you go. There you
Okay.
go.
And
Mhm.
as a medium, and I love the intro to your show because it said that you're working on finding the proof of the afterlife and these phenomenon that could meet the standard of a jury. And that once again, we are speaking the same language on that. And what do I do as an evidential medium? I have to present evidence transmitted from spirits through me that can be objectively verified. I mean, anybody can say your grandmother's here and she loves you, but if I start giving you what she looked like, her name, a personality profile, shared memories between you and her, things that there's no way I could know, then that is evidence. And the other thing about both careers is I'm certainly well aware of the jokes about lawyers, and people don't like lawyers. And the reason for that is when you go to a lawyer, very seldom do you go because it's a happy thing. It's usually because you've been arrested, you're getting sued, you've been injured, there's a contract dispute, there's something negative in your life, and people tend to take that negativity and they focus it on the lawyers. But lawyers are there to help people through the difficult times of life. And as a medium, what I do is by facilitating communication between somebody here and somebody that they love who has died. I'm helping them through the most difficult times of their life. So that's how the two different careers have melded.
And I can appreciate that, because nobody calls a cop just because they want to talk to them either. They call us when there's a problem. So I can certainly relate to that. Have you ever found that your abilities have provided an answer for you in a case? If that's a good question.
Oh, absolutely. God, I got so many stories, but it always came in very handy during jury selection. And I know that, as a police officer, you've been through a lot of jury trials. But for those of you who haven't, before the plaintiff, or in a criminal case, the prosecution, the state present their case and the defense presents theirs, you have to select a jury. And it's funny because in TV shows they always go right to the trial, but jury selection, and it's always been said that in circles with trial lawyers, that a trial is won or lost on jury selection. And the point of jury selection is for both sides to get a jury that is fair and impartial. The reality is you're trying to get people that are predisposed towards you. And so what happens is initially they'll bring in the pool of prospective jurors, and then the prosecution gets to ask these people questions about their views on the case, or views on the legal system and personal things, try to get a feel for them. Then the defense gets to ask questions, and then both sides gets to pop off, eliminate, they call it striking, a certain number. Then you end up with a jury. So here I am, I'm trying a case, and it was a crime of violence. My client was a big bruiser, and he got into a fight with another big bruiser at a bar. And guess what? My client was the winner. So who filed charges? I bet you saw that a million times. The loser of the fight filed the charges. So basically, big bruiser A beats up big bruiser B. So it's a crime of violence. And the prosecutor's asking questions, and then the prosecutor sits down. Now it's my turn to question the prospective jury panel. The problem was, I kept zeroing in on this one woman. I kept feeling something about her. And I kept getting a female spirit, a female energy connected to her. And I'm like, okay, this is trial. This really needs not to be happening, And I'm getting this tightening around my throat. So that indicates that this person died from some type of obstruction with their windpipe. And it kept intensifying. And so I'm like, all right, trying to clear it. And then the judge says, counsel. So I stood up and I asked a very standard question in a criminal case. Has any of the prospective jury members, have you or has anyone in your family ever been the victim of a violent crime? Well, Larry, lo and behold, that woman, she raises her hand and she's trembling. And I remember she had this olive complexion and these big dark eyes, and the tears just started rolling down her cheeks. And she said, a year ago, my sister was in a foreign country when an escaped mental patient strangled her, dismembered her body, and threw her in the garbage like she was trash. I'm standing there, and it's like all I'm thinking is, in law school, they didn't teach me how to deal with this situation. And even the prosecutor is usually one of these like really irritating people, couldn't, and I can hear my client kind of like, dude, what are you doing? And then I can see her sister's spirit forming. I mean, I can see this. And I literally had a foot in both worlds. And if the listeners want to find out what happens, you're going to have to get my first book, Never Letting Go, because I explain that whole story there.
Well, with that, we got to take our first break. When we get back, I want to talk to you about cold cases and one that you were involved in. So, folks, stay with us. Fascinating discussion with Mark Anthony, Psychic Explorer. We'll be back after these messages. We are back on the X Zone Broadcast Network, but with Paranormal Stakeout with my guest tonight, Mark Anthony. Mark, being a cop and also being a paranormal investigator researcher, the one thing I've always wanted to do is find that connection that will allow us to use this gift, this ability to perhaps connect with the other side and solve crime, cold cases, if you will. I understand you were just involved in one not long ago.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about that? I think this is an important subject.
Um, I can't give a lot of details because
Understood.
it's a brand new show that Zach Bagans is producing.
Mhm.
But they brought me in to use my abilities at this abandoned, used to be a sanatorium, because there was a suspected murder suicide there. And what I picked up indicated something quite different. And what's
Mhm.
fascinating is one of the other investigator, is a guy named Gary Galka, and he's the one who invented the spirit box.
Mhm.
And Gary's a really great guy. He was an electrical engineer, and unfortunately, his daughter died, and so he took his genius and started working on technology to pick up on the voices of spirits, and has been able to make contact with his daughter through that. And it was really neat because when we had some downtime, he was showing me this, and it's interesting because we picked up on his daughter and my parents and
Uh,
another friend of mine. And what was cool was the technology's picking up on their voices, and then they're supplementing the information through me. And I gave Gary some information about him and about his daughter that I had no idea about, which he verified. And so it's really interesting when you can pair up the technology of the electrical technology along with what I call myself the biotechnology in that. And I also worked on a cold case. I was on the CBS TV show called The Doctors, and they had me do a reading for Allison Feldman's family. She was brutally murdered, and it was a cold case. And the information that I got, I gave to Allison. It was all filmed, and it didn't make sense right away. But what happened was, I said that there was tissue samples found at the scene that have to be analyzed, and that the police have to expand the parameters of the blood test. And Allison's father said, "Well, the police they did do a DNA search." I said, "No, they're not doing the right one. It has to expand the parameters." So he went back to Phoenix, where the murder occurred, and told the police that. And so at that time, they instituted the familial DNA test, which I know you're aware of, and and,
mhm.
and that had never been used in Arizona before. And lo and behold, they found a match. They found, and there, I could go on. We could do the whole show just on the information there, but it led to the arrest of the guy, and he is still awaiting trial on premeditated first degree murder.
See, that's where I think that somebody with law enforcement investigative background, in concert with all of this, would make a very potent remedy to some of these cold cases. I really think that, and that's what I'd like to see, develop.
It's true, and I know that a lot of cops are very cynical towards psychics, but a lot are not. And because look,
Hmm.
as a police officer, and all the first responders, all the cops, all the paramedics,
Yep.
you guys have seen stuff that
Yep.
defies explanation.
So
Okay,
true.
and where psychics come in handy with law enforcement. Obviously, you could not put me on the witness stand and say, "So you saw a spirit that said this," because psychic intuition and messages from spirits are hearsay. And hearsay, the technical definition is an out of court statement
Mhm.
offered to prove the truth of the matter asserted. Because you always hear like objection hearsay because the statement was made out of court. Now, the way to get around hearsay is, can that statement or the person who made it be subjected to cross examination to take it out of the purely subjective into the realm of the objective? Now, obviously, statements from spirits are about as hearsay as you can get. I'm receiving messages from another dimension, all right? But while that may not be admissible in trial, what we can do is work with the police during the investigation phase and the information that a spirit gives me can be provided to the police, which can then direct them in the right path to find evidence which is admissible. So that's
Absolutely.
where we come in handy.
I agree, and I don't know if you remember, but the hearsay exception rule we have here in Florida might even be an opening for that. Now, it's used mostly on child cases, but it does encompass the same thing as you're describing. Certainly, you get information that leads the detective to a spot. Yes, I agree, and that I think is going to be the door to open. So,
Certainly. So, more police agencies use psychics than they'll admit. And look,
oh yeah,
the bottom line is justice. And if we have to remain in the shadows, as long as we're helping, then we're doing the right thing. Because these abilities, the way I look at my role as a psychic medium, as somebody who communicates with spirits, is my job is to bring forth messages for the highest of purposes to help someone get healing, inner peace, resolution, and closure from the death of a loved one. And if part of that communication helps us nab the person who, a murderer,
hmm
I think that's part of the healing process as well.
I totally agree. And there's a gentleman that really turned my. And I was one of those typical cops years ago who didn't.
Sure.
But I've had my mind opened and my experiences broadened. But a gentleman, Chris Huff is his name. He's helped me understand exactly. Can't say exactly, closer to what you guys can tell us now. On to another quick subject here. You were known originally as the psychic lawyer,
Right.
but more now you're more referred to as the psychic explorer. Explain to me how that metamorphosis happened.
When I, gosh, I'm trying to think how long ago that was. Had to be almost 15 years ago. I was in New York City and I was at a media conference about my first book, Never Letting Go. Excuse me. And one of the reporters there said, "Wait a second, this guy's a psychic medium and a lawyer?" He goes, "He's a psychic lawyer." And all of a sudden the media started calling me the psychic lawyer, and it caught on.
Oh
And
yeah.
my publicist and agent at the time, and then Rocky, who's my manager, they're like, "Well, this is good," you know. So I went ahead and got it trademarked because Mark Anthony, the psychic lawyer. But then I started appearing on a lot of shows like the X Zone and Coast to Coast and several other radio, podcasts, TV shows for my expertise in ancient mysteries, supernatural phenomenon. I'm also a near-death experience researcher,
hmm
and I study psychic mediumship through a scientific basis and explain what I do through the realm of quantum physics. And another media outlet, and they started calling me the psychic Indiana Jones and the psychic explorer, you know, because I've been to all these mystical sites. I mean, that's what I love doing, studying
hmm
ancient mystery and then go there and to
hmm
the ancient ruins and feel the energy. And so Rocky and I and my producer in California, Mackenzie Van Dorn Rice, we sat down and we started talking because my brand was getting too long. And so we came up with the idea of Mark Anthony JD, which is my Juris Doctorate, Psychic Explorer. So that way it rolls everything into one. Because when you're known as the psychic lawyer, people think that all I do is, and people say, "Well, do you predict the outcome of cases?" And I was trying to explain to them, no, that isn't what I'm doing. And then people want to pigeonhole me as just working on cold cases, which certainly I don't mind working on. But what I do has such a broad field. So I hope that explains, it helps clarify that.
That does, and the explorer, the ancient mysteries. That brings me to another topic, and I hope we have enough time before the break. We haven't really talked about ghost spirits per se yet, but that's certainly who you communicate with the other side. Recently, we're talking a lot more, hearing a lot more of the spirit world being connected with things such as UFOs
Oh
and
yeah.
dimensional type of events. Is there a connection?
How much time do we have before the break?
Well, we might have to do two
We may
different
have to go
shows
after
too.
the break. All of these things, UFOs, paranormal investigations, the shadow people, which I'm
Mhm.
sure you're aware of, and what I do as a medium, spirit communication, they all are what I refer to as interdimensional communication. And that means that here we are in our material world dimension, and we're communicating with beings that are in a parallel or an alternate or a distant dimension. Now,
Mhm.
there are different entities, be they aliens, spirits, the shadow people, that are using the same type of modality to communicate. In other words, there is a frequency overlap between our world and theirs. Um, for example, UFOs. The closest star to us is Alpha Centauri, which is
Mhm.
4 light years away. And that is a light year is the distance that it takes light to travel in a year. Light travels at 186,282 miles per second. So when you start calculating that out, we are now in the trillions of miles. So even at the speed of light, it would take a UFO 4 years just to get here from Alpha Centauri. And what if there's no life around Alpha Centauri? Maybe they're coming from 800,000 light years away. But according to Einstein's theory of relativity, nothing can go faster than the speed of light. And so, how could they do this? Well, we've all seen Star Trek and talk about, warp speed. Well, that's actually a real thing. And the Mexican physicist Alcubierre came up with the Alcubierre effect, which means that if a space vessel could create an energy field, a warp bubble around it of sufficient energy. All right, so let's say this piece of paper, here is Earth, and here is a planet 1,000 light years away.
Here's what we're gonna do, because we've come up on that break like a so
Okay,
hang on to that piece of paper, because
we're
I
going to
know where
come
you're
back to
going with
this.
it, and we're gonna come back with it. Folks, so much to talk about. Stay with us. We'll be back after these messages. We are back on Paranormal Stakeout with my guest tonight, Mark Anthony, JD, Psychic Explorer, and I'm gonna try not to interrupt you this time. We were talking about we are just getting ready to go into a very deep subject, so pick up where we left off.
So, what we're talking about is UFOs and other spirit UFOs in addition to spiritual entities. How do they jump from one dimension to the next? And we're taking UFOs first. And the Alcubierre effect, which is named after the Mexican physicist Alcubierre, we know that according to Einstein's theory of relativity, nothing can exceed the speed of light. So let's say that there's a planet 1,000 miles away, 1,000 light years away. That would mean the aliens would have to be traveling in their tin can through space for 1,000 years just to get here one way if they could only go at the speed of light. But the Alcubierre effect is when an energy field is created around the craft, which causes a warp in the space time continuum. So let's say here is planet Earth, this corner, and here is the planet 1,000 years away. So the alien technology would indicate that they've created a energy field that instead of going across this 1,000 years, they fold the space time, so they jump from one coordinate in space time to another instantaneously. And this is something that scientists, that physicists the world over said is possible. It's just that we do not yet have the technology to generate that type of energy. But they're saying that this is possible. So you're not violating Einstein's theory of relativity. Instead of going in a straight line, you're making a ripple there. Now, that's very fascinating because that also makes a lot of sense because then these vessels would be able to get here instantaneously. Now, how do we apply this to the spiritual? In my book, The Afterlife Frequency, and that's my latest book, The Afterlife Frequency is the scientific proof of spiritual contact and how that awareness will change your life. And I introduce many scientific concepts and terms that I've developed through years of research. And think of our world as AM radio. It has frequency, vibration, energy, and the spirit realm is FM radio. So you have these two energetic systems running parallel to each other, but occasionally they're able to overlap. And what that means is, as a psychic medium, I have to bring my brainwave frequency to a point where spirits are able to bring theirs down out of FM radio, and we meet and overlap, and that's how spirit communication occurs. Conversely, we believe that that's how spirits, like the shadow people, and the shadow people are cool because they're the most commonly seen spirits. They appear as a shadow, usually against a wall, and that's essentially what we believe they're doing. They're adjusting their frequency to make that jump from one dimension to our dimension. So what we're seeing is different entities using a similar modality to communicate. Now, if you'll bear with me for a moment, last Saturday, actually last Friday night, I was on Rob McConnell's show, The X Zone, and Rob and I were talking about Calvin Parker. And Calvin Parker is the most credible alien abductee on record. He was 19 years old 50 years ago in Pascagoula, Mississippi, and he was fishing with a family friend, this guy, Charles Hickson, who was 42. And Calvin's a great guy, and I interviewed him twice for my podcast, Destination Supernatural, something I was working on a couple years ago. And after the interviews, I'd call Calvin and we just talk. He was just a great guy. And so Rob and I were talking about him and how he and his friend were fishing, and all of a sudden this metallic object came out of the sky. He said, we tried to run, but we couldn't. This white light, it hit us with this light, like we were paralyzed in it. And these two robotic entities came out, grabbed him and grabbed Charles, brought them onto the craft. He said he felt like a lab rat. They put him on this examination table. They started probing him, doing all these things to him. And then eventually they released him. And fascinating that the sheriff's department at Pascagoula that day was flooded with phone calls from people reporting UFO, flying saucer, all types. So a lot of people saw whatever this was. And Calvin didn't want to talk about it, but Charles Hickson went public. It hit world news. Long story short, over the past 50 years, Calvin's been subjected to polygraph, to lie detector tests. He was interrogated by local police, by state police, by the FBI. He was subjected to sodium pentothal, the truth serum.
Truth serum.
Yeah, he went through hypnotherapy, and in every single interrogation, lie detector, sodium pentothal, hypnotherapy, he showed zero signs of deception, 100% truthful. And he's considered the most credible alien abductee on record. And he told me, he goes, Mark, why would I make something like this up? He said, I was a 19-year-old redneck, and all I wanted to do was go fishing that day. And he goes, and if you really want to screw up your life, go around and tell people aliens came in and abducted you from a flying saucer,
Yeah.
And he was just such a genuine guy. And so I was talking to Rob about all this, Rob McConnell on the X Zone, and then I find out the next day Calvin died on Saturday. And so he may have died on Friday, but it didn't become public until Saturday. And it just, touched me that, maybe he was reaching out to say, hey, Mark, I'm in spirit. And I just wanted to take the time to honor him. But I did a reading for Calvin. I've also done a reading for Nancy Tremaine, who is also considered an extremely credible alien abductee. And I've done readings for 3 other people that said that they were abducted by aliens. And what's really fascinating about this, Larry, is their loved ones in spirit all discussed the abductions. They came through and said, yes, they have marked you, and they explained to this one young man that I did a reading for that you need to change your diet because to make yourself less interesting to them because it's the way you metabolize protein. And in every single one of the readings, it came out about protein, how they metabolize protein. So I had a subsequent interview with Chris DiPerno, who is with MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network. Now, MUFON, these are not a bunch of cranks. You got a lot of scientists, and I believe Chris used to be a police investigator as well. And so what he does is he debriefs the people who claim to be abductees, because some people are making it up, but he said others are very genuine. And I mentioned to him about the protein, and he said, whoa. He goes, what did you say? And I said, well, they're all claiming that the aliens, the spirits, are saying that they're being targeted because of the way they metabolize protein. He said, Mark, in every single one of the alien abductees, they have an insatiable desire for protein. They can't get enough of it. And I called up Calvin and I said, well, what's the deal with you and protein? He goes, dear God, Mark, I can't get enough of it. So why? Why is it that factor that they're seeking out? And it certainly leads to a lot more interesting questions.
Questions, absolutely. Now, I want to go back a little bit here because I'm forming another question in my mind. We're talking about the spirit world and the frequencies. That certainly makes sense to me. Then you're discussing the almost the wormhole effect. I think is
Yeah.
what you were
Yeah.
describing earlier with the aliens. Yet both sides are talking about each other. We're talking about Einstein's theory of relativity, the dimensions sitting next to each other. So what I'm kind of getting out of this, Mark, are we talking about almost everything is one, a collective consciousness?
In
Is
fact,
that kind of what
yeah,
is that where we're going?
I believe so. One of the terms that I introduce in my books, Evidence of Eternity, and more recently, The Afterlife Frequency, is the collective consciousness. And we know that everything is made of molecules, which in turn are made of atoms, which in turn are composed of electrons, protons, and neutrons, which in turn are made of the smallest particle, a quantum. That's where we get the term quantum physics, which is electromagnetic energy. So everything
Mhm.
in that is matter on the most basic level, Larry, is made of the same electromagnetic energy. And that means you and me, the headphones we're wearing, the radio waves that this show is being
Frequency and
broadcast on,
vibration, everything. Yeah.
yeah, the light of the sun, the surface of Mars, and beyond are made of all electromagnetic energy. So therefore, everything is interconnected. And you know, the great spiritual teachers have been saying this for thousands of years. We're all brothers and sisters. We're all cells in
Mhm.
the body of God. We are all interconnected. And now we know from quantum physics, from the energy standpoint, we are.
I'm gonna really take a stretch here then. You remember what was it, Chariots of the Gods,
Oh
Carl
yeah, Eric von Daniken.
Eric, thank you. Okay. They're talking about aliens coming here and actually being worshipped as gods
Yes.
back then. Is that all part of this?
Well, it could be. It could be. I mean, think about it. If all of a sudden you landed somewhere, and the people there were living in the Stone Age, or let's say the Bronze Age, and
Mhm.
there's aliens walking around with LED lights and the ability to fly, certainly they would take on godlike proportions. And I remember years ago being in the Amazon, and I was on a research vessel, and we were on the Urubamba River, which is one of the tributaries of the Peruvian Amazon. And we visited several villages, and these were as primitive as it gets. I mean, grass huts, no running water, no electricity. I mean, people were dirt poor, very. And so we get off the research vessel, we're wearing Air Reeboks and Nikes and our clothes, and they're looking at us, and they're all staring at our feet because they didn't have shoes. And I remember somebody had one of those. It's kind of now it's antiquated, but at the time an SX70 land camera, and you take a picture, and it would, put out the picture, and then the picture would start to develop before your very eyes. Well, let me tell you, we're taking pictures of the people, and then we're holding them up and letting them develop, and they're like, I mean,
Yeah,
and so to answer your question, if they weren't, accustomed to the fact that people would happen by, let's say we were the only vessel that ever visited there, what would those people think we were?
they would think that we were gods, and the gods are speaking to me now for our next break. Dang, it goes so fast. So, folks, stay with us. We've got one more session left, so please stay with us with my guest, Mark Anthony. Be right back. And welcome back to Paranormal Stakeout. My guest tonight, Mark Anthony, JD Psychic Explorer. Mark, we've scratched the surface on so many very, very deep topics. I feel like we've done none of them the justice they deserve. So we're going to probably have to do this again if I can talk you into coming back, because there's some areas I really want to delve into. What I do want to mention, everybody, though, do remember to check us out at paranormalstakeout.org. You can find out more about my shows, as well as other shows on the xbzn.net station broadcast network. X-Zone Radio and Television Broadcast Network. I'll get that out. You can also find out more about me at paranormalfbi.com and IndianRiverHauntings.com. But go ahead and send me messages, thoughts, and comments at ghostguideparanormalstakeout.org. Do check out all the great programming on the network, xzbn.net. Mark, how can folks get a hold of you, and what new is going on with you right now? What would you like to tell the folks about?
Well, I would like to invite everyone to visit my website, which is afterlifefrequency.com, which is just like my latest book, The Afterlife Frequency. And you can find out about booking a reading with me. I also invite you to sign up for my newsletter so you can discover what's coming up. I know that Larry and I will be I'll be coming to one of your events on October 14th in Florida. Yeah, looking forward to that. And what's cool is the night before, on the evening of Friday, October 13th, I'm going to be on Coast to Coast AM talking about the myths and legends behind Friday the 13th and why it's so, where the superstition come from it. But in October, I also have a couple of Light Circle events, and Light Circles are online events limited to 6 people, and everyone is guaranteed a reading. Once again, you can find out about all of that by visiting my website, afterlifefrequency.com. Sign up for the newsletter. You can also find out on my calendar events about subscribing to Best Holistic Life magazine. I'm a VIP executive contributor. I write stories every month. And this month, I think you'll like, and you definitely want to read the October article, because it's called The Great Ghost Hunt at the Stanley Hotel. And and that was a really amazing experience in paranormal investigation. So afterlifefrequency.com. And I also do a live stream show every Thursday night, The Psychic in the Dock, where my co-host, Dr. Pat Basili, and we take calls from listeners, and I bring forth messages, and she helps people understand them. But Larry, let me tell you something. I definitely would be honored to come back to talk about more things, because just talking to you on the show and on the breaks, I mean, we have no limit to the things we could talk about.
And like I said, I want to do some of these topics a little bit more justice than we've been able to do tonight. So I want to talk about something now. The collective consciousness is a theory, is a topic that I find infinitely fascinating. You were discussing about, and I love your analogy. We here on this plane are the AM radio, and those that have passed before us are on the FM, and sometimes they come together. In your work, in your studies, what really happens? What have you found that really happens after we pass? And how is it the folks on the other side are able to communicate with us? And once again, a very
wow,
that's a 2-hour discussion just there. But you combine that with the wormhole theory, dimensions, it makes one wonder where are we going? What what's happening after we die? I'll let you take
Um,
it from there.
Yeah, well, that's basically the reason that I wrote the afterlife frequency is to explain what you just asked. And in the afterlife frequency, I introduced the concept of the electromagnetic soul, the EMS.
Mhm.
All right, before I was talking about everything on the subatomic level is made of quantum electromagnetic energy. We know that from the laws of physics, energy is neither created nor destroyed, only transferred from one form to another. We know that from every great spiritual teacher that the soul pre-exists the body, comes into the body, moves on after the body dies. And so I developed the term the electromagnetic soul to describe what we really are, which is pure consciousness. That's a soul, a spirit, which is eternal electromagnetic energy. So, to answer your question about what happens when we die, think of your brain as a computer hard drive. It did not create the soul, it merely hosts it. So, think of that soul as like an energetic drop of water. And when we physically die, that drop of water plunges into this vast eternal sea of souls. And that is the collective consciousness. So, you take you with you when you die. Okay, the body is simply, it's like,
Vessel.
yeah, when your car stops working, you're not the car, you get out of it and you move on. All right. So we leave that body behind. And the fascinating thing about the EMS is yes, you're an individual, but now you're energetically linked to other souls, linked to other souls, linked to other souls, which is why during readings, when a spirit comes forward, they can see past, present, and future. Because part of Einstein's theory of relativity is that on the quantum electromagnetic level, time doesn't exist. That's why they can see past, present, and future. Also, this is how a spirit will know things that far exceeded the scope of anything he or she knew in this world because they have access to this infinite database. It's where they get healing messages, scientific messages, and I've conveyed those. And I work with scientists at the University of Arizona, where they're working with me, bringing forth messages that I don't even understand what they are. But the scientists are like, oh my God, that's the information we're looking for. And this is all dealing with the collective consciousness.
Mhm.
So that is it in a nutshell. But the collective consciousness, you can call this, I think it's part of what we can call God. I mean, having been
Okay.
raised Catholic and in a Christian faith, and I'm
Yeah.
Italian, so I tend to think of God in the Michelangelo painting sense of, the wise guy with the white beard and the angels and everyone's drinking really great red wine and all this and that's nice for us to have a point of reference to understand. But when we're interfacing with the collective consciousness, um, it is so much greater than any artistic depiction or any book or any scripture. And I'm not downplaying or insulting those. I'm just saying that what lies beyond is beyond our ability to even begin to grasp it. But what I do know is it's wonderful.
Well, I think it can be argued too that throughout history, man has picked an I don't want the best word I can come up with as an icon with which to credit all of this to. So that's where the the great history folks in history come. So, but it's
Yeah, the
all just one.
king. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I had trouble articulating that, but that's exactly right. So it's man's inability to grasp the greatness of what the collective consciousness is. So they have to actually tag it with something that makes sense to them.
We as humans do because
Yeah.
while the brain didn't create consciousness, the soul is contained within it, and the brain is our arbiter between the material world and who and what we
Mm,
are. But the brain is only designed for finite perception because everything that we know has a beginning, a middle, and an end. We're born, we grow old, we die. Trees eventually fall and buildings crumble, so everything we have is finite. And when you're working with the spiritual, we're dealing with beings that are infinite. And so we have to create an
Hmm.
interface, because you and I, we're bright guys, but even the smartest people on the planet
Can't comprehend.
can't comprehend infinity.
Yeah.
So it's easier to think of God in the person of Jesus or Shiva or whatever your cultural reference is, than this quantum electromagnetic field with no beginning, no end, and that is just expanding into eternity. It's like, what was that 70s or 80s movie? Too much input, too much input.
I had a friend of mine one time put this to me, that when you die, your soul goes to heaven, i.e. the collective conscious, but your spirit is what we see here. Energy staying behind. Could that be what we see sometimes also?
Well, I believe that there's residual energy echoes,
That's it.
and also our EMS, our electromagnetic soul, is a multi-dimensional being. So I would not discount what your friend said, because um, our soul, even now, is having also an infinite experience, because we are energetically connected to the collective consciousness. It's like, why the other night, all of a sudden Rob and I start talking about Calvin Parker,
Yeah.
who then we find out dies the next day. And I did not know that at the time of the show. Now, coincidence or
No.
synchronicity?
Synchronicity. I do not believe there are any coincidences. I've come to learn that one also.
Precisely.
Um, so I think it is all connected. We've got a couple of minutes left, and I don't want to interrupt this last comment from you, because I would really like to know what if you have a message for my folks out there listening, or anybody that catches any of your broadcasts. What message would you like to share?
It was made very clear to me. Um, People ask me, how did you transition from law to being a full time medium? And about a month after my mother passed, I was driving back from court, and I just knew I needed to pull over. And suddenly there was this flash of light in the car, and I looked at the passenger side of the passenger seat, and I saw my mother's silhouette in the silver white light, and her voice filled my head, and she said, "Mark, you've been given the gift of mediumship so that you would not be crushed by grief, but now you must help those who are suffering with theirs." Now I'm trying to process that, and then I get another message, and this is the message that I want to share with the world. She said, "Your life's mission is to help people understand that God exists, that the afterlife, heaven, nirvana, whatever you want to call it, exists, that your souls are immortal living beings, that humans can communicate with souls, and that we will all be reunited when it is your appointed time to leave the material world in the light that you call God." And I was soaking wet with sweat, and all I could say, Larry, was, "Okay." It was one of the most, if not the most profound spiritual experience of my life. And that's the message that I have.
And a deep one. And with that, my dear friend, we're going to have to unfortunately call it a night, but we're going to have you back on, because we've got so many more things to discuss. Looking forward to seeing you in October. And folks, thank you for joining us tonight on Paranormal Stakeout. Please take care of yourselves, love your family, hug your kids, take care of yourselves, and we'll see you on the other side. Have a good night.